Thanks, Nina. Hi, everybody. Welcome aboard. It's great to see everybody coming in from all over the world. Welcome back to another great AIM webinar, this time with our friends from Cadence, talking about forms and document capture using Microsoft 365, using Microsoft Syntex. And it's an important topic because, look, pick any important process and you can bet that there's at least one document at the heart of the workflow, and activities that are critical like loan origination, customer management, case management, accounts payable, onboarding, employee onboarding, client onboarding, all of these rely on documents and forms to get the job done. And how well we manage this content has a direct influence on how well the people and processes within our organization perform. So in this webinar, we will examine the power of new AI-assisted forms and document capture features within Microsoft 365. We'll get an in-depth demonstration of Microsoft Syntex, a service that uses advanced content, artificial intelligence, and machine learning to provide an end-to-end intelligent document processing solution. We'll learn how to perform field capture on things like forms, invoices, receipts, and more. We'll learn how to generate documents en masse with content assembly and utilize Syntex for legacy repositories to classify, tag, and migrate content. So get ready for another informative webinar. It's going to be a good one. But before we get going, I do want to say, as Nina mentioned, that we do want to hear from you too. Feel free to chat away in the chat feature. And if you have a question for our guest today, please enter it into the Q&A feature, and I will attempt to get them, as many of those questions as we can, into the Q&A segment later on in the webinar today. Now, before I introduce our guest, Nina, I know we have a poll question that we want to run. So Nina, let's run that now, if you don't mind. It's really a poll question, just real quick poll question to understand, where is everyone? Where are you all at on your journey with forms and document capture? Are we experts and we've figured it out and we're here to talk about advanced techniques, or are we just starting out? Please help me, all right? Or somewhere in between. So if you take just a second here for a moment, we'd love to understand where everyone is on this continuum between being an expert or just starting out with forms and document capture. All right, Nina, are we getting responses in?
Absolutely. I'm going to give them 5 more seconds, but it
All
seems
right.
like we've, okay. So I'm closing the polls now, guys. Hurry up and vote. All right. So the final number is 5% say they're experts and they have it figured out. 43% say they're just starting out. Please help them. And 52% say they're somewhere in between.
Okay. Very good. Well, that is good to know. A lot of us are just starting out. A lot of us are somewhere in between. We have some experts with us. The experts, please feel free to chime in with your opinions and your suggestions, either in the chat feature or if you have a question for our guest today, please enter that into the Q&A, which brings us to our guest, Jordan Uterhagen from Cadence Solutions. Jordan, are you with us today?
Hi, I'm Kevin. Hello.
Hello, Jordan. Welcome back. Part 2 of a great series we've got going on with Cadence. Jordan Uterhagen is managing director at Cadence Solutions. He is an expert at Microsoft 365. Jordan and his team have completed more than 80 implementations across North America in a variety of industries, including energy, utilities, financial services, insurance, public sector, you name it. So we're really pleased to have Jordan with us today. Jordan, welcome to the webinar. Please tell us more about forms and document capture in Microsoft 365 and how that can lead to better process performance.
Yeah, it's going to be part 2 of our series. It looks like there's at least 100 people that aren't sick of me yet, so we'll carry on today. So if you've seen me present before, I like to do a lot of realistic scenarios, less PowerPoint slides. There are a few here we'll run through quickly. So I run Cadence Solutions, as Kevin mentioned. We're a partner with OpenText, Microsoft, of course, and SAP. Today we're focusing exclusively on Microsoft and the Syntex side of things, which is their latest baby coming out of Microsoft that they're really excited about. So next slide there, Nina. There we go. So we're going to run through 3 scenarios today. just like what's kind of in the agenda. We're going to go through field capture on forms, invoices, receipts. So an inbound invoice process, we get this request a lot. AP and HR are the two we get constantly. So we're going to go through field capture first, show you how it can be captured, how we can start a workflow. The previous webinar we did, we focused a lot on on workflow and e-signatures. So we're not going to get that deep into it today. We're going to focus on the capture piece up front and doing a simple approval and validation of something that was captured. After that, we're going to go into generating a document en masse with content assembly. So if you've been in the industry a long time, you used to call these things mail merges. You used to do them from your desktop with an Excel sheet or an Access database and generate a bunch of documents. Of course, that's been modernized. We're going to go through and do that with Syntex and the content assembly piece. Not here to just spout off about Syntex, but it's going to be one of those brands from Microsoft that has many different pillars inside of it. So e-signatures coming this year, content assembly is one, the capture side is another. So Syntex is going to be a very umbrella-like brand from the mothership there. So I'm just going to take over the screen share, Nina. And I'm going to bounce into the SharePoint setup. So I just want a thumbs up, make sure that everything's working here. If anyone can give me one, Kevin or anybody in the chat, just make sure everything's looking good on the screen share.
Looking good, Jordan.
Excellent. So we're going to go through a couple scenarios. So the first one we're going to go through is an inbound invoice. So one of the ways that we constantly get asked, and the pandemic really accelerated this, was I have all these different formats of invoices coming in, and I need a way to only put people in front of the ones that need validation. There's a couple tricks in the industry to do that. One is three-way matching. If you're in the AIIM space and your accounts payable people are pulling their hair out, by all means, approach them and say, are you doing three-way matching with your PO, your packing slip, and your invoice? If the answer is no, dig into a process there before even you may consider going into some technology. Somebody I was speaking to recently, their organization, I don't know if they're on the call today, is 10,000 invoices behind in processing right now. So accounts payable is an absolute nightmare for them. So the scenario I'm going to run through is we're actually going to go through and we're going to email an invoice into a mailbox. And we're going to pick that invoice up with Microsoft Syntex and go through the validation on it. We're going to send this one in. While that's processing, I'm actually going to just jump forward quickly and prep a second part of our demonstration, which is going to be the auto migration of things. So just so nobody knows I'm cheating, I'm going to drag all these documents in here and we're going to let Syntex go and auto classify this while we're off doing other things. It takes about 5 minutes, but nobody wants to watch the system work. So as the invoices are coming in, what we're going to see is this validation screen. And this validation screen is going to be the place where you go through and validate what the capture tool has done. Now, other technologies that have done this, Kofax, Intelligent Capture, so Kofax separate, Intelligent Capture from OpenText does this as well. That used to be called Captiva. Way back in the day, that was called Input Excel. So they've branded it a number of different ways. But this is essentially the validation screen that you need to put in front of your AP clerks or somebody that needs to validate that the model is working. So you train the machine scrapes and captures the data off of the actual image that's coming in. And after that data is in, you can go through and do whatever you like with it, match it with a purchase order, match it at a line item level, send it off for somebody to do approval, reject it back to the vendor if something's a discrepancy in items or quantities, but all that can be done from within here. So this little interface that we kind of whipped up together here has the ability to go through and see what's been approved. You can see it's grayed out if it's approved, what's pending, the line items that are captured out of everything, the vendors, and of course we get asked a lot, can you do lookups? Can you go grab this from other things? Of course you can. So we're able to do that. as you go through and perform the capture and the validation, now, because you're in the ecosystem of 365, you can twist this any way you like. You want to start a Power Automate workflow, go for it. You want to send this over to Dynamics and do an auto pay, you can do that as well. We've worked with organizations that say anything under $500, auto pay it. Don't even put it through approvals because it costs us more to do the approval than does to just potentially pay something that we shouldn't be paying. So as we go through here, we can go through and actually send this off for approval to Adam. I'm logged in as Adam the whole time here, just so we're not going and bouncing user logins the entire time. When Adam gets this approval, he can actually get it in Teams as well. So we can go through, grab this, and do everything from within Teams. So if validation isn't required, or if someone downstream is participating in the workflow, the big trend right now is to do everything from within Teams. I'm in the Teams browser here because my personal Teams is running and I don't want to get that connected to the demo environment, but it works the exact same way on your desktop as well. So I can see the invoice, I can see what's been captured, the amount, and any other metadata we want to put into the approval message. And then I can go through approve or reject or take a different action. So I want to reassign this to somebody else, cancel the request altogether, kick this back to a vendor saying, hey, we already paid this, or maybe something isn't correct, even though the validation was correct. It may be an invoice that we're just not ready to accept it. We can go through, push this forward, submit the response, jump back to our little dashboard. See that we have some in pending approval. See that we have a bunch approved as well. And basically take the process from there. So with the team side of things, if we need a double approval or we want to notify somebody that is approved, you can do that as well. By all means, I would not give them a save as PDF button. We want to auto file this somewhere else where we can put it under some kind of governance and control. So that's a quick AP scenario. We are focusing on the capture side today. So the capture of the fields and everything coming back out of this with Syntex. Now, the beauty of Syntex in terms of comparative to the, we'll call them other technologies, is it's entirely cloud-based and you train the machine in the tenant you have. It's also consumption license. So they don't make you go buy 4 million, documents or pages right away. You can try it out with a couple different document types, and number of pages is kind of the licensing model. So it's a pay-as-you-go model and less of a perpetual, submit a big budget upfront type model. So it does help you try out a few things. There's a trial on there right now as well from Microsoft. I believe it's 30 days now. So we've worked with a few clients on this as well, and we'll kind of move on to the next part of the demo. So in terms of the assembly side, so Syntex has the ability to go through and create, like a mail merge, documents from within metadata fields and run some logic around that as well. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go through and create a statement of work with the content assembly feature. The beauty of this, and we've heard this so many times in specifically contract management, is it eliminates lawyers. And if there's lawyers on the phone, there's a lot of people that want to eliminate you in this kind of process. So what we're able to do is simply, if you watch as we pick through the fields here, it's going to auto update the actual content that's inside of the language and contractual clauses inside of the actual agreement itself here. As we picked ACME, we actually have it correlated with the client contact and their role. We can go through and populate all the placeholders. You'll see them highlighted in green in the background, and actually go through and put the ACME Corp, James is in there as the CEO, and populate everything. We're able to go through and create this document automatically. And in past lives, getting into Cadence Solutions, we do a lot of this with contract management for NDAs, for specific clauses where if the contract was more than a certain amount, we needed these sections or these placeholders in the document. these insurance clauses, these other things. If we're doing this for an HR letter, or if we're in financial services and we're producing statements en masse, this is another way of doing this and simply consolidating your technology. There's so many organizations that have a number of different technologies and software installed that now it's kind of that consolidation game in terms of I want it all to work together. And if one offering can do that, it's something to definitely look into. So I'm going to go through and create this document. And once we've gone through and created that document, we're going to see it in our library here right away. Added a few features around sending this thing for sign off. So if we do want to send this internally for sign off, again, we can flip into a Power Automate side of things to go through and send it for sign off. This can either go external or internal. If we're going internal, it can be that Teams approval again. And we can request sign off. Of course, you can track everything as it's going through. This will change to the pending state. And that simply, we've created a document from templated language with placeholders. If you'll notice, there's not a lot of room for a user to make a misstep in there. If we want to go right to PDF, we can do that as well. But it's that ability to lock everything down. Well, 4 years ago, we were working with a client where their sales folks were changing their contract language to close the sale faster. And they didn't really find out how big that problem was until years into the agreement, when they realized that was a major problem where they changed language and terms and commitments that the salesperson never should have had the right to do. It never got caught, and they did it en masse across a number of different agreements they'd put out. So that's the second piece here. So the content assembly piece. I don't know if there's anything in chat we need to take care of, but I'll get to that. I see about 9 messages sitting there, and we'll have lots of time for questions today. Third piece we're going into is auto migration. So the easiest analogy I can have with auto migration, and if we can pop that poll up, Nina, if you have the second poll coming up. There we go. Have you tried, thank you, Nina. Have you tried auto classification tools before? So we've worked with a few municipalities that have tried them. Mixed reaction in terms of the accuracy of them, and the costing model was a bit prohibitive to go through and scan a whole file share or crawl a whole large repository where there's a lot of legacy things. So if you've used them before or not, just answer that poll, and then I will wait on Nina for the results.
Okay, closing the poll. So the results are 11% say yes, 59% say no, and 29% say I am familiar with them but haven't used them.
Almost 1 in 10 have taken a run at it. So that's probably a good thing that only 1 in 10 have taken a run at it. The analogy I like to use for doing auto classification and essentially using Syntex or another similar product to go through and migrate content is a coin sorting machine. You dump in all your coins into one of these machines and you get bills out the other side, or a gift card or something else. So when we do a migration, you get all that clutter and all the hoarding that's happened over the last number of years gets pumped into a system. And then you need to go find the content type. You need to classify this information. You need to tag it. You may need to, do field level capture in order to tag, classify, or even file that content somewhere else. And what I'm going to show you, and what we kind of prepped earlier, was we can use the entire 365 ecosystem to do that. Move that content into SharePoint. Doesn't even matter where you put it. You can put it in a migration queue for now. Point Syntex at that queue, train the models in Syntex to recognize the documents, and then once it is recognized the content types and potentially put a retention label on it, file that into the appropriate place. one of the biggest things we get into a schedule stretch in projects is the cleanup activity. Users that haven't worked at the organization that long don't want to go clean up somebody else's stuff. That's just a boring, tireless activity. This eliminates that. And if you have that value embedded in content that's sitting on that file share and you're thinking of moving it up into SharePoint Online, this is an easy way to do this without needing a bunch of overhead from your users and your employees. So what this looks like, this is the same area that I moved in all that those documents in earlier in the demonstration, maybe 20 minutes ago. And this goes through, and you'll see the content type is tagged for all these different pieces of content we have here. So just to open one up, here's our invoice, Paul's Nursing Supply Company. We have employee data sheets. And we have the statement of work, the same one we just showed in the previous demonstration. So these are all in here. You can see we're not cheating. After we have the content type, we can easily link that to a retention label. So if we do have that one-to-one, maybe we do, maybe it's more complex than that, but we're able to actually go and retain this. Now, we went through a sizable proof of concept with a large government entity recently, and the accuracy after we trained the model was 97%. We're able to get it 97% accurate with government content coming in to the system with 5 different content models. So it was a huge win for that organization in terms of how they're able to go through and potentially look at this technology to perform legacy discovery within anything in SharePoint Online, as well as consider it for upcoming migrations from other repositories. If you're sunsetting an application, if you're moving that file share information in, if you got stuff buried in OneDrive on a user side of things and you need that a little more open and you want to move it to a SharePoint doc library, this is a way to do that, to bring that content out, train the model, make the machine smart, and just feed the machine. It's so much easier than having to go through and hunt and check each kind of document and field. So those are the 3 ones I wanted to show today. So we got assembly, we got the auto classification in terms of going through what you see here on the auto migration, and then the invoice side of things for the invoice approval. So we got looks like a few questions coming up. So Kevin, if there's any that you want to cover, I'll turn it over to you, and I'll stand by here to see.
Very good. That is Jordan Uterhagen, Managing Director of Cadence Solutions. We're here talking about forms and document capture in Microsoft 365 using Microsoft Syntex. If you have questions for Jordan, now would be the time to go ahead and put them into the Q&A feature, and we will get them into this section of the show. And Jordan, we do have some questions coming in. The first one, can the repository be set up by departments? Approvals will vary depending on the department.
Absolutely. Yeah, when we go through and or anybody goes through and performs an implementation like this, you're going to be segregated by your permission structure and your security. That usually ends up being in different sites and doc libraries. If that follows into, if you're referring to the contract example, approvals, that's where you would direct the approvals as well.
Very good. And can you use scanned PDF documents as an input?
Yes, you can.
All right, very good.
It'll do sorry to jump in, Kevin. It'll do OCRing as well. So it will actually OCR the content inside of the document. So if you're grabbing a bunch of legacy stuff that's coming in, non-OCR'd stuff that was scanned many moons ago, it can go through and process that. It's not feature for feature with every single long-term application there, but it does a lot of the heavy lifting.
Okay, very good. What level of 365 do you need to have to do the migration? Do you have to pay per document to move it?
So migration, let me preface that. So if we're just moving content in, you can take a terabyte or whatever you have for storage available in SharePoint and move that in. When you go to point Syntex at that repository, it's a consumption license. So if you want to go through and say, I only want to go through 1,000 documents and they're 2 pages each, there's a transaction or a fee from Microsoft to process those 2,000 pages, 1,000 documents times number of pages. Okay. So there's a Syntex calculator online that can give you the licensing side of things, but it's only what you put through the, we'll say, the intelligent machine, the machine learning side of things.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Jordan. This one coming in from Jill, and thank you everyone for your questions. Keep them coming. Jill asked, was this POC tested against the entire organization's content or a subset?
It was a subset, sizable organization, like total org size of over 30,000 employees. So we couldn't possibly do that. But it was a targeted test with a variety of content. So there were 5 specific document types they were looking to identify in already existing repositories. And then the way how this works, you feed it good data and you feed it bad data, and then you kind of rinse and repeat to increase the accuracy based on the findings.
Wash and repeat and refine.
You got
As you
it.
go.
That's an implementation. So
Right. Ben asks this question: how granular can the content type recognition get? Would it be able to recognize SOWs from different organizations with different SAL structures and content, for example?
yeah, we can make the rules much more complex than what you saw today. So in the past, the way it's worked is you may even look for not just zonal recognition, so meaning a portion of the page, you may look for specific terms and near other terms. So I want to see the word cadence next to vendor, and if that's the combination, or cadence and MSA, then we know that's an outside contract that we may need to identify differently.
All right, very good. And Jacob asks, of course, the question that is on everyone's mind, I guess, is Syntex included in the E5 license?
I wish, Jacob, if it was included in the E5 license, we'd have a whole bunch more implementation success in terms of as a broader industry.
Do you see that coming in the future? In fact, what is your feeling for the next generation of this kind of technology?
I highly doubt they're going to include it in E5. To my previous comment, Syntex is going to be a pillar, much like Viva is. So Viva has topics, Viva has insights, Viva has goals. Syntex is going to, it seems like, follow the same model where it's going to have content assembly. E-signature has been announced for late 2023. The capture side of things is big, probably the biggest thing I see coming out of that.
Okay. This one coming in from Lindsay. So Syntex is acting differently than the auto classification function within Purview, ? If yes, how is this different on a high level?
So yes, it's different. I'm not sure if there's some underlying technology overlap there. We don't have access to that, of course, but it is much more, how do I say this, enterprise grade in terms of where it can be used within the organization compared to Purview. And Purview, you're going to need it under some control to get there.
Okay.
Syntex, the fact we can point at things and train the model differently, I'd say the usability of actually training the model in Syntex is much easier than Purview. Someone's going to email me, call me out on that, I'm sure, from another organization, but
Right.
that's our experience so far.
Okay, very good, and they are welcome to, in fact, call you out and connect with you to discuss this further. Eric asked this question: can the Syntex migration tool assign metadata columns, term store, instead of content types or retention labels?
I'm going to defer to my colleague Sang, who's on the line here. If he can put that in the chat for Eric, I'll have him.
All
so
right.
we have our technical team lead here for M365
All
to
right.
answer the heavy lifting questions that I'm not able to.
Okay, very good. And we should mention that Sang is out in the chat feature chatting away with you folks as well. So Eric, perhaps you can connect with Sang there on in the chat feature to find out more detail there. If you have specific questions for Jordan and me during this Q&A feature section of the webinar today, please use the Q&A feature and we'll get your questions to Jordan directly. This one coming from Tyler: when the machine learning model maybe isn't so confident that it's in its decision, is there a way it can flag its decision to be manually looked at?
So the scenario there is, I'll probably have to defer to Sang on that, but I'll go through the invoice example. If there's a confidence rating we're not comfortable with, doesn't validate a field, one of the required fields is not populated, that will pop out, and we can put that in front of somebody to take a look at. It's going to depend on the document type there. So if we're saying go through this, lease agreement and determine if it was for a land lease or a, residential lease, and it false positive identifies it as a residential lease, but it was really for a land agreement. It's tough to even push that out in front of someone unless we really refine the model up front pre-deployment. So
Okay.
it's the typical like consulting. It depends.
Right. I always wonder about the measurements of before and after. Do you have any measurements to demonstrate the percentage of time saved or the impact to process efficiency in general when using this approach?
So we deployed similar tech for an accounts payable organization back in 2018, 2017 timeframe. Their keying of data went down by 85% on invoice capture, just invoice capture. So they had everybody keying every field all the time. We put in a piece of software very, very similar to Syntex. Syntex is absolutely comparable. And they reduced their keying by 85%. So for magnitude, they had 24 people keying all the time, every day.
And of course, this applies across the board. You mentioned AP as an example. What other processes are really work well with this approach, and where can we find the most immediate benefit?
So, my opinion on the most immediate benefit for probably a lot of the crowd on the webinar here today is the ability to go and grab the value out of the data that's sitting somewhere dormant. So new process, absolutely. We can go scrape forms. We can, institute a new accounts payable or contract approval or an inbound contract. All that's easy, but unlocking that value of information that's sitting on a file share that you have to get in to govern, you can bring that into SharePoint, like I showed on the slide, point Syntex at it, create some models, and then have it auto file. Have it auto tag the metadata fields, have it apply that content type and retention label, have it everything kind of go out automated, but still you're onboarding all that information. So that to me is like the light bulb moment we had here when the team was kind of dabbling with this technology, many months ago, and saying we could do migrations with this, guys. Like this is a really easy uplift in terms of a tool set that is friendly with the ecosystem. We're not tagging something on the side of it.
And how does this apply? There are a lot of folks in our audience that will be involved with information governance and compliance, retention. How is it applied in those specific functions?
So when we have that content type, when we were able to link it to the retention label, we kind of have the entire life cycle developing from dormant document sitting on file share, moving to SharePoint, having the Syntex identify the document as a record, tagging it with the content type, tagging it with the retention label. Now you're inside of Purview, right? You got the retention label applied. And with the retention label, maybe we want to go file that somewhere. Maybe there's a specific area we want. If that's a settlement letter or something that's very sensitive, we want to then proceed to different lockdown mechanisms. So we've already connected the records and governance side to plain vanilla content that was sitting there.
We are here with Jordan with Cadence Solutions. Now, if you have any questions for Jordan before our time is over, now would be the time to get them in. We'll squeak them into the wire. We do have another question coming in, Jordan. Can this tool be used for databases and traditional content repositories?
I need some clarification on traditional content repositories.
Like microfilm?
That's traditional. Yeah, archaic. Databases, not at this time. I'll say that.
Okay, very good. All right. And so one of the ways that one of the things I think is a benchmark for me in terms of using new systems and improving processes is really how it improves the performance of the organization. We've talked about process improvement, and I love process improvement. I love saving money. I love building efficiencies. But in what ways can these techniques be used to move the needle in terms of organizational performance, improve customer experience, for example, reach new markets, and really build new revenue?
But the trend we're all seeing, even personally, is companies are making customers do more on their own. You log into a portal, you fill something out, you have an insurance claim, take your own pictures now, do your own thing. Everything's kind of been pushed outwards from the organization. The key thing that I feel Syntex solves in that scenario is getting data from the outside to inside an organization efficiently, and not just meaning fast, but cost efficient as well, to process that data internally. So if we're getting a bunch of forms submitted from the outside and we don't have a mechanism to capture the fields off of Adobe, and we haven't went with the web form style portal or anything where we're having clients log into, we're not quite that level of maturity, you can have Syntex sit there as your traffic cop and feed everything through it, and now say, I've captured everything. There's my efficiencies. I don't need someone to go look at it and capture it. And then I can start a workflow or file it appropriately, whatever the next step may be, without needing to go and put someone in front of a large volume of documents regularly and routinely, without being able to capture that knowledge they have in their brain of, this is A, this is B, and this is C. We train the model to do that through that, and then they can move on and do something different.
All right. Just a couple of more questions in the final minutes that we have. This one again from Eric. Thank you, Eric. Is there any case study available with more details on the migration application of Syntex? I'm concerned about the accuracy when you have very diverse record types.
So we will be publishing something. We're going to genericize our findings, or I should say our client name, not our findings from that. The diverse record types, Eric, I'd actually like you to reach out and shoot me an email so we can have a follow-up conversation on that, because we're always up for a challenge and want to know more about that scenario. So we can see about the accuracy on that.
Great, obviously, great. Okay, and one last question. You mentioned AP. How would this work if you have a financial system where all the info is uploaded and processed? Can you import into Syntex?
So I'm going to assume the document's living in that financial system as well. So you'd have to take the document out, feed it to Syntex, and then we can integrate back with the financial system. So if we want to go and look up a purchase order, look up line items, do a compare on quantity in the financial system versus quantity on the invoice, all that's possible unless you got some home-baked financial system that we haven't heard of, but it's all possible there. But generally, you got to get the document out and into Syntex. Then you're kind of home free.
All right, very good. That is Jordan Uterhagen. He is an expert in Microsoft 365. It's been a pleasure to have you here, Jordan. Check him out, Cadence Solutions. Thank you so much, Jordan, for being our guest today.
Thank you, Kevin.
All right, well, with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Nina. Nina has a few things to tell us about as we close down today. Nina?
Yes, absolutely. So if you guys loved this second part of this series, you're going to enjoy the third and final part of this series, Records Management Out of the Box with M365, Myth or Reality. This third and final part of the series is coming May 17th, and you're automatically signed up for the rest of the series if you signed up for this webinar. So we can't wait to see you then. Also, AIIM is heading to New Orleans and promises to be a conference unlike any other you've ever experienced. This year's theme is content in the workflow, the flow of work. The AIIM 2023 conference curriculum provides you with a comprehensive and proven methodology for mastering your organization's content to operate more effectively, reduce costs, and stay out of trouble. Your role as an information management professional is always evolving. So register now, you won't want to miss it. As we bring this webinar to a close, a few last-minute reminders. We've recorded this webinar so you can catch anything you want to hear again in a recap email that will be sent within 24 hours. A link to this resources for the webinar was put in the chat. You'll find a copy of this presentation as well as additional resources through that link. Don't forget also to take our feedback survey. A big thank you to our underwriters, Cadence Solutions, for a wonderful, informative webinar. Before we go though, I'd like to ask Jordan if he has any last minute key takeaways for our audience.
No, I threw my information, contact info in the chat there for a few that wanted to reach out. We'll be at the AIIM conference, so we'll see you there. We're the reigning cornhole champions, just so everybody knows. We're going to show up and smoke AIIM again. We put Peggy into retirement last time, so be ready. That's right. I'm talking to you, Jess. You got it, Jess.
Okay.
Bring it
How
on,
about you, Kevin?
fellas. Bring it on.
Well,
How about you,
I
Kevin?
don't know how to follow that. You know, look.
I know, right?
Well, this is why you all need
it's
to
been another
come.
great session here today. I mean, we have experts like Jordan that we can rely on that are experts in Microsoft 365. And look, if you're just starting out, this was a great session here. We have Microsoft 365, Microsoft Syntex as platforms to do things that were impossible to do only just a few years ago. So I'm really pleased to have been here with Jordan and look forward to part 3 coming up soon.
Absolutely. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us. This is Nina from AIIM saying, see you next time. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everybody.